Down.
We are live on Wednesday afternoon and following the floor here on Wednesday, April 30th, 2025. We are back to looking at last year's Act 135 related to trying to do a pilot program with cameras in work zones in pre-pilot programs. It was hoped for this year's construction season, and we have run into some snags, and we are very fortunate to be joined today by Commissioner Morrison and I guess Colonel Birmingham and Executive Director Mandy Worcester is here too. So I know that Representative Pouch has been sort of helping lead the charge, and we're going to start with. Okay, thank you very much for coming in, and please join us in the hot seat. I guess we're all looking for a way forward to get the cameras in the work zone as much as we can with the resources that we have. So thank you very much for joining us, and barring unless we need anybody and everybody else, I don't think needs any more background on what we're talking about and figuring out where we go from here. And thank you very much.
Great. Thank you for having me. My name is Mandy Worcester. I'm the Executive Director of Policy Development for the Department of Public Safety. I was hoping that I could focus my testimony on some of the things that I heard in the committee and try to, talk through them a little bit. So that would be the focus of my testimony. I wanted to start by saying the Department of Public Safety and the Vermont State Police care deeply about work zone safety. For us, this is simply a resource issue. I heard over the past couple of committee meetings, yesterday you had a potential vendor that came in and discussed the review of an incident for this piece of legislation. And he said that it would take no more than 1 minute to do the review of the vendor's database. And so I just wanted to talk about that a little bit. So that review process, it consists, if I understood correctly, of confirming the deployment log, viewing images to see workers present in the work zones, viewing the lab compliance document, reviewing images of the license plate or images, I think there's a couple of them, and the associated data that would show the speed, and then the officer would then make a decision on a violation. So all of that is estimated to take no more than a minute. It's important to note that this is not the end of the process. So I wanted to just bring us back to Act 135, and I just wanted to read just a small piece out on page 7 that says notice and complaint. And it says an action to enforce this section shall be initiated by issuing a Vermont civil violation complaint, which I'll probably refer to as a VCVC going forward, to the owner of a motor vehicle bearing the rear registration number captured in a recorded image and mailing the Vermont civil violation complaint to the owner by U.S. mail. It goes further to talk about the civil violation complaint shall be issued, sworn and affirmed by a law enforcement officer who inspected the recorded images and data. So I thought for the sake of my testimony, I might take a traffic stop as an example. So if a law enforcement officer conducted a motor vehicle stop, a traffic infraction, we'll say it's in a very mundane traffic stop. Everything goes great. All it is a violation of speed, and the officer is going to issue a VCVC to that operator. I've been a police officer for 16 years prior to this, so I had some experience doing traffic stops. And in my estimation, a traffic stop, a mundane one, takes no longer than 10 minutes, roughly 10 minutes for that start to finish. And the majority of the time during that traffic stop consists of actually issuing or entering in the information for the paperwork. So it's either for the written warning or for the VCVC. That's what the majority of the time is spent on a mundane traffic stop. And so for the sake of this conversation, we'll say that's 7 minutes. 7 minutes to do the paperwork for the traffic stop on a roughly 10-minute stop, if everything is clear sailing. So I wanted to talk about what that process looks like on the traffic stop. So the law enforcement officer needs to access the DMV for vehicle or registered owner information. They need to complete the entirety of the VCVC, which is a pretty extensive form. There's lots of fields. And they have to ask the operator if they're active duty military. Those are the requirements on a traffic stop. So now I wanted to go back to the pilot process. So for the pilot process, there are a number of sites that the law enforcement officer must visit. So we talked about the first site being the vendor's database, that the vendor said it'd take no more than a minute per incident for the database. And then we need to talk about the issuing of the VCVC. So they have to do the database for the vendor. That vendor database, as I understood, will likely include DMV information right in that database. The challenge then becomes when they get to the records management database, that is not linked to the vendor's database. So they'll have to enter the information from the Department of Motor Vehicles to populate the fields for the VCVC. And then they have to go to a separate site for the Soldiers and Sailors Relief Act, which is required for the VCVC. Now, if you remember when I spoke about the traffic stop, that was simply a question. All you had to say is, are you active duty military? This requires going to another site to be able to look that up. So now we're looking at, if I just break it down, so it's about 7 minutes, we said, for the traffic stop paperwork process. And I think that's bare minimum, right? That completely bare minimum, plus the 1 minute for the review for the database. So now we're talking 7 minutes per incident. I heard the vendor say that it would be no more than 1,000 incidents per day, per 8-hour period for these work zones. And we have to use the max when we're determining resources. So 8,000 minutes per 8-hour workday, which is what that equates to for 8 minutes total for that process, and then the 1,000 incidents. If I then take that 8,000 minutes and I divide that by 60 to get us hours, that is 133 hours, or roughly 133 hours per a 1 8-hour workday. This is no breaks, no union contract, nothing. This is straight, just 8 hours day. If we take that the 133 hours, and we say law enforcement officers work 8 or 10-hour shifts. For the sake of the math and to make this simple, we'll say they worked a 10-hour shift. So for 133 hours for a 10-hour shift, that equates to 13 law enforcement officers doing this work for 10 hours for 1 day's worth of data. This is a significant draw on resources. I wanted to just
Question, Representative Powell?
It sounds like you're thinking of the absolute worst possible case. And that 1,000 tickets, I think was not said as this is what we think that couldn't possibly be the amount. It'd be the absolute extreme. So I think that number, in my mind, my question is when they fill out a ticket, not that I've gotten a ticket, but I think it's handwritten. But if you were doing it in the office, would it be online, would it be typed out or would it be handwritten in the same way?
Thank you for that question. And you make an excellent point, and I was meant to make that point at the end and I missed it. So I'll answer your question, but even if we cut that in half, we're talking about an extensive number of hours of resource per day.
My question was, is it done with the computer, or if it was in the office, would you do it by hand or would you do it on the computer?
Sure. So I think that you can do for a traffic stop or this, I would assume this would be done electronically in a database, but it's important to recognize that database shows all the same fields that Vermont violation complaint form would have, and you would have to fill out each field. So that traffic stop that I talked about could be either filling it out electronically or paper. It could be either for that traffic stop. You're welcome. That is all I have for testimony.
It's still yours.
So this 1,000 per day, I'm not sure where that number came up. That was the question that we asked, but it had been floating around. If we have 1,000 per day of speeders in excess of 10 miles an hour in an active work zone, what can the Department of Public Safety do to reduce that?
Thank you.
What would be done?
Thank you for that. This was my part of the testimony, and then I'll defer to the commissioner for next steps, if that's acceptable.
Sure, thanks.
Thank you.
Was there a question before?
So I'll ask my question another time.
Okay.
Thanks, Wendy.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank
My
you.
name is Jennifer Morrison. I'm the Commissioner of Public Safety. I'm joined by Colonel Matthew Birmingham, the Director of the State Police, as well as Major David Peterson, who oversees the Field Force Division. As you know, the Vermont Department of Public Safety can do many things to impact speeding, both in work zones, but on interstate highways and regular town roads as well. Some of that is by being visibly present on our roadways. Some of it is by making traffic stops in and around problem areas, and work zones certainly would qualify as one of those. The question is not one of our willingness to enforce traffic laws anywhere that they need to be enforced. The issue is a very practical one of resource allocation. If we have calls that are coming in through 911 or through the 10-digit lines that require police officers to respond, they leave the highway immediately and go to respond. So the issue of them sitting in a work zone or, contiguous to a work zone is not possible to guarantee, absent that being an assignment, probably an overtime assignment for which we have no budget. The other point I would like to make before I turn this over to the Colonel for any additional thoughts is that the responsibility for highway safety is a shared responsibility. It is not the Vermont State Police's sole purview. There are many other law enforcement assets throughout the state, at the state level and at the county level and at the local level, that have an interest in highway safety, and they should be considered as part of the solution. If using a law enforcement officer to do this work is truly the solution that the committee has found to be the most beneficial, that should not be a burden that is shared by only the Vermont State Police. We already cover 90% of the geographic area of the state of Vermont and 80% of the population. So I would submit that there are other resources that should be called to participate if this is a truly a priority. I do have some solutions for how we can get law enforcement officers out of this, but first let me ask the Colonel. Matt, do you have additional remarks?
Hi, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Hi, Matt Birmingham, the Director of the State Police. Thank you. I'll just echo kind of what's been said a little bit. The State Police is, first of all, highway safety is one of our pillars of our strategic goals every year. And it is a high priority of ours to ensure the safety of the roadways in the state. But the State Police has been faced with significant staffing challenges on our sworn side for the last 5 years. We are currently at about 54 vacancies on our sworn staff of 323, which is about a 17% vacancy rate. We are currently filling shifts on overtime just to staff shifts. In addition to highway safety, though, the State Police also is focused on, through our criminal division, many other high priority events in the state, to include domestic violence response, to include homicides, drugs, violent crime, firearms. And these things consume a massive amount of time and resources, and are high priorities for our detectives and our troopers. Our call volume has grown significantly in the last 10 years, and while our staffing has shrunk. So we are really stretched thin with our sworn resources right now, trying to just manage our basic mission and our basic function. And the reality is we don't have the sworn capacity to absorb anything else at this point, because we are already cutting out calls for service that are low priority, just to handle crimes with victims, which we believe are high priority. And so it would be an immense challenge for us right now to divert sworn resources for what really is an administrative function.
Thank you, Colonel. So when we think about solutioning this, I have talked with Secretary Flynn from AOT. We collectively believe that this committee could consider an amendment to the Soldier and Sailor Relief Act that would somehow obviate the need for a sworn law enforcement officer to ask that question or make that inquiry of the database that heretofore I had not heard of. I mean, I've been out of stopping cars for just a few years, but didn't know you could search on a database. And to allow for civilian staff or for a third-party vendor to issue either a VCVC or another type of penalty. I mean, there are more ways to skin the cat than just a VCVC. There are certainly other fines and penalties that the state could enact that a third-party vendor could levy and could have the same import in terms of if you fail to pay this ticket or at least respond to it and ask for a hearing, that would result in the suspension of someone's privilege to operate. So there are ways that it could be structured that take law enforcement out of it. And in this time, it's, the colonel just told you the rather bleak staffing landscape that currently exists. We're hopeful, the applications are slowly starting to rise. Academy enrollment numbers are slowly starting to rise. We think we're turning the corner, but we're not the only ones in the state that are having significant staffing shortage of sworn officers. So I truly believe that there are ways we can do this that are creative, that particularly because it is a pilot project, we will know relatively quickly if it's going to change behavior. At the end of the day, what you're trying to do is change behavior, right? And there are more ways to change behavior than a police officer spending 8 minutes per incident or case, and then beginning a process which Mandy didn't even get to. Okay, and if the person contests, if the same police officer is issuing, I'm just going to make it up, 50 tickets in a day, imagine if only 10% contest those tickets. Now you have that same officer tied up in a civil traffic court proceeding that's going to take them further away from that work, the issuing of tickets, but also from the other portfolio of work that, as the colonel described, has to be our priority. Crimes against people have to be our priority. So I would encourage the committee, and I know that I am supported by Joe Flynn in saying this. I'm encouraging you to find a way to take law enforcement out of it, particularly because it is a pilot project. And I think we will find out what we need to know about its efficacy and its impact on changing behavior in relatively short order. 4 to 6 months, I think we will know if those speeds are dropping in the manner in which we'd like to see them drop.
I guess I share your concern. That's one of the questions that I asked the people from Connecticut that did testify of the amount, of percentage of people that do contest their tickets. And he said it was extremely low. I think he said it was 1 or 2%. So it is low on that end. Obviously a couple of people were here last year when we passed this legislation. And we went back and forth whether it should be law enforcement or a third party. And it's just our belief that we would probably see everything else. Law enforcement had to be the person or the people to implement this ticket. And I mean, I guess my just general thought is when people are pulled over nowadays, is everybody given a ticket for speeding?
Not everybody.
No, that's what I'm saying. They are not. So it's not like. And I do think 1,000 is way high. Like you said, this is a pilot. We don't know. And theoretically, I'm not saying that you would, but you could probably pick and choose the tickets that you want to issue. You wouldn't have to go through all of them. You would have that discretion. You would continue to have that discretion. You might see a certain threshold to say, yes, this really warrants it, that we need to move forward with it. And if not, you could just let it stay on the pile. But I think from the standpoint of this committee, we really need to get this off the ground. And, if you come back to us next year and you said we were flooded, we only had our means was only able to process, 2% of the things that came in. Then we would take a serious consideration and say, all right, we need to scrap it. But until we have that, I think the way to move forward is with the state police. That's, you do patrol the interstate, and that's, one of your main focuses. It's not, the sheriffs and, the local police. I know they can patrol anywhere, but that's not their main focus. And, that's the theme of one of the themes of the state police's control of that, but that's just sort of where our mindset is, and it's just sort of a frustration that we can't get this off the ground because we've heard, over the years of obviously a need, the deaths in work zones. And this is just one of the tools to do that. And we heard testimony where it does change the behavior. I don't have the exact number, but I think I went down 10 miles an hour.
I think in Connecticut, they said that people who got the first warnings, the amount of the first, which was just a warning, no cost, the 90%, they never showed up again. Only 10%, were caught a second time. So, and that they showed just general behavior, not only at places with signage saying where there were active cameras, even at other areas which didn't have cameras. Once they rolled this out, general speed everywhere did go down, and I think in Pennsylvania too. So it seemed like a program that had merit and would reduce the danger in those work zones. I just question coming in here and saying this is the worst possible thing when there are ways to sort of limit it. It's just a pilot. We certainly, would talk to others.
I hope you've considered other law enforcement assets that are not responding to 911 calls, that are not responding to in-progress violent crime, that are not responsible for patrolling rural areas in other parts of the state. So I really hope that this is I'm telling you that we can't staff it. It will be to the detriment of other parts of the mission that others aren't cut out to manage. But there are others in the law enforcement constellation who can manage this project that do not answer calls for service when the citizens call 911. So that's a value decision you have to make.
Well, can I ask a question? Sure. The bill's already passed. Has there been any discussion at the administration side, since the administration not only has the state police, the agency of transportation police, has there been a discussion among those groups about how best, who might best take this on?
I've not been part of that discussion. If it's happened at another level, I'm not aware of it. My understanding was that coming out of this committee last year, that the DMV police were exempted from this pilot project, that through testimony, they had been unconsidered or not considered to be the enforcement arm of this pilot project.
I don't recall, but it's not in the bill. It says Department of Public Safety.
Right. I think that's how you landed on the Department of Public Safety. Yes. Uh-huh. So, I mean, I don't know how to be more honest with you, that we don't have the resources to add this mission to our portfolio. If that is what is holding up the project from moving forward, is solely that, then I'm happy to carry this message back and problem solve within state government for how to do a pilot project. And we'll go from there. Go ahead, ma'am.
What do you think about, I'm sorry, you finished?
No, yeah.
Go ahead.
What do you think about the idea of asking the police officers in the Department of Motor Vehicles to be in charge of this program?
I think it's a reasonable consideration. I think that there's stuff that we should talk as a executive branch team about, if that's the direction that we're going. I'm not looking to pass a hot potato over to someone else, but I'm very clearly signaling that we do not have the capacity to take this on as the sole owner of this project.
That they would be one consideration, perhaps?
It would be one consideration. I think contracting with off-duty law enforcement officers would be another.
And what does that entail? Contracting with off-duty law enforcement?
Well, you contract with them to do the traffic safety when there's construction on the road, right? You contract with either the municipal police in the area that it's happening or with the sheriff's deputies. And they sit there with blue lights running. And I mean, you see it all over the state. That would be an option, is to extend the portion of a contract like that to include review of the vendor's camera footage and issuance of warnings or VCVCs as appropriate.
Representative, Wells,
Yeah, that was, you answered part of that question there. I wondered about the sheriff's department, what's their capacity and their staffing, so they couldn't take over this pilot program themselves.
I can't speak for there's 14 sheriffs. I can't speak to their staffing right now. Sir?
Commissioner, I'd like to just throw a few different pieces at it. First of all, I really appreciate you and your whole team coming in today and talking about it, because judiciary, law enforcement is only tangentially part of what we do. We're not involved in that. There's other committees in this room that are much more familiar with the challenges facing the Vermont State Police and facing your position and whatnot. So, we don't have a ton of that, a ton of your testimony or expertise in this. We're also, is a 50% turnover of the committee from last year to this year. So the makeup of the committee and the views may or may not be the same, reflecting of what drove the bill out. So I do appreciate that you guys, that you're all here. I appreciate that we get a chance to hear some of this, because this is not part of what we spend a lot of time in. We are very much it is a pilot that we are just trying to find a way to help workplace safety. And I know that you're totally supportive of that piece. And I also understand that you have a huge responsibility every day to manage. So I want to make sure that is very much understood by the committee, or we appreciate that. Also, facing 50 plus openings and 17%, I'm really curious on how long that historically has been the case. What we would do or want to do is just find a way somewhere. And we don't spend any time on the idea of discretion, and learning a little bit about discretion piece. If the pilot that we're even to generate, who knows, it was set at 10 miles an hour, but we're only issuing tickets at the most extreme example, that the discretion spent 1 hour a day on this, that there were 5 tickets going out, the word would, spread incredibly fast, and that behavior changed by the camera and the activity. I don't know. It doesn't, my understanding, limited understanding of discretion, this 1,000 number is, I'm not even sure where that comes from, but some level of minimum support perhaps is another way to look at it, in terms of what's the minimum amount of time, or what your maximum amount of time is, would be the minimum least amount that could be put in to find some way to help move forward. Reopening the bill up, my understanding is, could create a whole new level of judicial review and whatnot. And I think that would lose an entire another construction season, which we didn't want to do. We really wanted to find a way to get cameras out there. So if there is any concern that we're not being respectful to the amount of challenge and work that you have, I certainly didn't say that is not our intent, and that we very much appreciate how hard it is for you to be here to do this that seems out of your normal area. I do still feel like through this bill that I feel a responsibility to find some level of solution. If amending it is the only way to do that, we'll have to go down that path. But the idea, at least my understanding, was that there was enough flexibility between the bill and discretion to find a way to get something out the door. Maybe it wasn't crafted in the best possible way, but I know there was significant consideration for it. So I want to make sure that I'm clear about, if there's frustration, it's only about trying to get safety to the spot, and it's not about what we.
I think we all share the same goals.
So it's not our frustration what the Vermont State Police do every day. But we feel stuck, and we don't know how to express that.
I appreciate that. And I think it's probably my job to go talk to my colleagues in the executive branch about how to get this unstuck. Appreciate what you're trying to do. I sincerely believe there is a non-sworn path that could be walked. Obviously, that would take some lawyers and some other stuff, and it might not necessarily require reopening the bill. I believe the sticking point Mandy, you might have to jump in and correct me on this. The sticking point might have been when any RFP or a contract came along that we were supposed to sign as the lead on this, and is like, wait a minute, what? Like, we're contracting for this and taking on this responsibility. So there's there's probably ways we can help it get unstuck, but I'm not sure that the procurement of the technology would have to stop how it gets issued. But you may need to take legislative action to allow someone other than a law enforcement officer. And it could even be done under this period of time for a pilot project, so that maybe if we find out that that's not the way to go, that it reverts back to only a sworn officer being able to issue the ticket. But I really need to, again, foot stomp that against the landscape that all agencies are in right now, just barely starting to emerge from the large uptick in violent crime that our communities experienced in 2021 and 2022. We are all having staffing crises, and we have to find new ways to deliver the same service that changes behaviors. And it's not just about traffic safety. It's about chaos and disorder in our downtowns. It's about people not being able to comport themselves to the law or social norms and creating chaos all over the place. We have to find new ways to do it with fewer sworn resources. And I think this is a great opportunity to try that. So let me go back to AOT. Let me go back to my team and see what we can come up with to find a path forward. I appreciate that you're trying to make something better, and we share your goal. It's very difficult to imagine that we could satisfy the goal and do the job you give us, given our current resource restraints.
Yeah, and I thank you all for coming in, and I do respect the load of work that, is must deal and seems insurmountable. I just wonder if another possible way, since there's discretion, and, based on driving the highway, I see regularly if there's state troopers out there patrolling the highway. If you didn't take whatever the number of resources, do that each week and say, hey, 4 hours a week, we're going to apply to this. And then we'll see how many tickets come in, how many requests come in from the vendor, and how many you're able to process. That's going to give us the same amount of data. And then if we know the percentage that get processed, we'll then see how many repeat offenders we get based on that data, even if 100% aren't processed. But if you took, X amount of resources and said, hey, we're going to try to do this every week, X amount, and in the same way you might, for drunk driving projects and things like that. So that's just suggestions.
Kurt?
Thank you. First of all, I'll reiterate too, I appreciate the committee's desire to want to improve workplace safety on the interstate. We're with you on that. To the representative's point on shifting resources, the problem is that troopers are on the roads when they can be, and because traffic safety is a priority mission of ours. However, that's the first thing that goes when you have to respond to a 911 call, a domestic, a shooting, a homicide, is that they won't be on the roads. We don't divert resources away from patrol to an administrative function, because we're also enforcing other laws on the roads, including, and you mentioned it, DUI, which kills people. So if we're not out there, if we're taking that 4 hours of patrol and we're putting it in an office and the trooper's not on the road, they're not going to be able to identify DUIs. And that is unacceptable to me as the director. DUI is an incredibly important function of the state police, not just DUI, but drug trafficking, human trafficking. There's many other crimes that go into a traffic stop that you cannot get with an automated speed device. So every minute that's diverted away from that are some very serious and dangerous crimes that go undetected. I will reiterate this again, just so the committee hears it. I hope we can find a solution that does not involve sworn law enforcement. The state police is in the process and has been for the last 4 years since our staffing really plummeted. And to the chair's point, prior to 2020, prior to the pandemic and the murder of George Floyd and police reform, which had significant impacts on law enforcement around the country, We were in the range of about 15 to 20 vacancies a year, fluctuated up and down, and it was low as 5 at one point. So 50 to 60 is really problematic for us and unheard of. And we have been pulling mandatory overtime shifts for the last 3 years. Our detectives have had to work it. The state police is under incredible stress right now, and I cannot be more clear about that. Workload stress, because the workload is increasing while our staffing is diminishing. We have had to cut out a tremendous amount of responses that we used to do. So I have to reiterate what the commissioner says. We do not in any way have the capacity to absorb this. There will be something that will have to be given up. And at this point, I don't know what that is, because everything we're handling is violent crime and crimes against people, and potentially dangerous crimes like DUI and aggravated or aggressive driving. So I don't know where we would find the bandwidth to reduce our hours on things of that nature to work on this. It would not make any sense to me as the director. Thank you.
The only way I could see this working, and this is not something you can guarantee because who knows when it's going to happen, is that if we have an injured trooper who could be assigned to an office to do this while they recuperate, but then you don't know. I mean, you don't want anyone to get hurt. You hope they don't get hurt. That's literally the only resource that I can think of that we could, in good conscience, stick in an office to review this footage.
I mean, that is possible. However, that's not a guarantee. I mean, and certainly you don't want people on workers' comp or hurt, and that's not a guarantee. That may not be, we may not have that available.
And it also presumes that the person is injured in a way where they want to come and work on light duty as opposed to being out on workers' comp, and we have no control of that. So trying to be creative, but I don't think that on the fly in this room is the time or space. So you have our commitment that we want to be part of the solution. I have some work to do to go back and try to problem solve this. And I appreciate you letting us tell you that it's not for lack of wanting. We want to join in this work. We don't have it. There's no juice left in the squeeze.
And there's always value to having met and heard directly and personally to the testimony of Representative Burke and stuff.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, been reading about this, but to really hear you speak about this directly, and see that it's really a crisis.
We're trying to turn it around.
Sorry that you're.
How many people do you have in the academy? You were saying not sworn officers, they're not sworn officers yet. Is there any way to, like, if they're at the 5-yard line, become a sworn, sort of maybe have them do it as part of?
No, they go directly from the police academy to post-basic training, which gives them specific certifications like DUI processing, fingerprinting, et cetera. And from that, they go directly into field training where they are attached to the hip. No, there's not an avenue there. I mean, there's just not, and I would not give a brand new officer that level of discretion without getting them on the road and having some mentoring and training first.
I appreciate your testimony, and I can't speak on behalf of the whole committee, but personally, I welcome your kind of creative thinking about how we can come to a solution and look at other resources that we have. And as has been stated, like, it would be great to not have to go back and revisit the act. I don't know, because that would be the simplest path, but I suppose that is a possibility too. But anyway, just would welcome your thoughts.
Must have been the deadline. We're past our time with you. That's twice today.
Simon himself on his laps. Walking laps.
I'm good.
You're good?
Yeah.
Representative Cook?
Yeah, we certainly would, like to hear if you do come up with some possibilities, maybe 2 or 3 options. Can we expect that you'll come back with that, or?
Yes, when would you like us to come back with that? Please don't say tomorrow.
No.
Well, the rumors have it that we'll be here somewhere between the 23rd of May and the 30th of May, but we will.
How about next week?
We can follow up with that.
Okay,
Down this
Mandy
line.
can be your point of contact, but I will carry this back and discuss. Circle up and talk amongst ourselves. And do you have a designated time for the pilot project? Is it 6 months?
There's not a timeline that, well, construction season, we're gonna probably miss this year.
Oh, 6 weeks.
We're gonna, yeah. So we're gonna miss this construction season most likely.
It was,
At this point.
yeah.
And so the idea of by the time there is an executed agreement and equipment, and my understanding is we're likely to miss this, so that the urgency that we felt trying to get it out for the April first, to get it in this construction season is not likely to be met. We really want to make sure that we are ready to go with the next construction season next April.
And
That's,
there was an education piece
But there are
ahead of this too.
Right.
So
There are
like
three-
in April it starts an education piece and then, come summer, maybe, I don't know, June, you'd have the 3 pilot sites.
I'm sorry.
3, yeah. That's the key. There's 3. This isn't like,
There's only 3 of them. Is that what you're, I'm
yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
That's what we're trying
I just wanted to make sure that.
It's not a long term, at this point,
That's-
it's not a long term thing. It's 3 pilot projects.
So that's 3,000 a day.
What's that?
So that's 3,000 to review a day.
No, they're not gonna be at the
They're not
same time, at the same
Yeah,
time.
Yeah. Just trying to make this the worst.
And if there are 3,000 people.
Hey, I didn't say 1,000.
Miles an hour, then we've got an even bigger problem,
Right.
right? If we have 3,000, Representative Casey, real quick.
That Soldiers Act, I'm not sure if I'm.
Soldier and Sailor Relief Act.
Yeah, is that the sole reason why we have to have a sworn officer? Is that
I
what
think
I
that's a
heard you say?
lawyer question, but I know that is a huge hurdle and has historically been a huge hurdle. Is that the law currently requires that a law enforcement officer determine if the person is eligible for that. And it's a rather arcane provision anyway. So if you did away with it altogether, I think it would be fine. But it was intended back in the day that if a person did not contest their ticket or show up to a hearing within 20 days, that it was presumed that they were on active duty and might have been deployed. They wouldn't automatically get their license suspended for noncompliance. So I believe that now being able to respond electronically to all of these things over the internet may not even make it relevant, but that would again be a lawyer question.
I believe we had testimony that it's a federal law. That you can-
Right.
Yeah, and so it's not anything we could change,
Hmm.
that requirement.
You're in our phone a friend spot.
The only thing I wanted to say is the reason I use an extreme example is to say, even if you cut that in half, the resources are still, even if we said it was 1,000 hours only, right? Because it was 1 hour or 1 minute to check the vendor database, that's still 16 hours per 8-hour period of video footage to watch. So I use an extreme example just to illuminate how much of a resource draw this actually is.
It could be, and we could say, okay, we're only going to watch this much here and this much there. There's ways that it could be done. It might not be the best way, but it might give us a snapshot into what full throttle would look like on this initiative. But we'll be creative and we'll put our heads together, and we will get you a response before the end of next week.
That's
Thank you.
much appreciated.
Yeah.
Thanks for all the time.
Thank you.
We gotta get back to
Thank
work. Thank you. We are
This is my
adjourned
work.
for the next 10 minutes.